Today we're going to unwrap our final piece of the Evergreen Mystery Sew Along. Now what you're going to do is go to the website and download part 5. That's going to have the information on the quilt top and the backing. So what you'll do is take your rows that we made in the videos in parts 1 through 4 and put them all in order. I have them overlapped slightly, and all we have to do for the center is start sewing. Very easy. And then at the end of the video I am going to go over the backing. So to make this easy, I'm going to put these right sides together, and they already fit nicely. I don't really have to line up the center because it is already lining up. If it was wavy, I would match my centers first, but here I really don't think I need to. And that's going to happen more often when you have a small quilt because there's less room to mess up. So you're just going to pin all the way across, and here there are no seams to line up. So I have that together, and then here, do the same thing. So you'll just put right sides together. So if you're joining in late and you're new to the sew along, you can go to fatquartershop.com and download all of these patterns for free. We have 4 that made the rows, and our final pattern is to put the quilt together, and it's called the Evergreen Mystery Quilt Along. Now here, it does not matter which way you press, but I'm going to press the easiest way. This one has the least amount of seams, so I'm going to press toward the top, but it really doesn't matter. Just get it nice and flat. I'm going to do the same thing here, and I think it's easier to press to the bottom because there's less seams here to press up against, and this right here needs to be fixed. So I need to press this down. And you'll notice the edge of my iron is right on that seam. So now I'm gonna leave this here, and I have this go in the right direction, and I'm just gonna put these together and pin. And again, there's no seams to line up here. It's easier to press this direction towards the light green. And again, make sure you don't have any duck pleats right here. And when you look here, this actually should have lined up, and it did, but I didn't worry about pinning it. So that actually came out really nice. So this is your quilt center. It's going to be 27.5 by 33.5. And when you look at your instructions, we tell you your fabric A sizes and your fabric B sizes, which are your borders. So I have cut my fabric A and fabric B 2.5 inches by width of fabric. Now I'm going to use my mat to measure the sizes, add my borders, and trim down. So now we're going to move to page 2. And like I said, fabric A should be 33.5 inches. So I'm going to take my fabric A strips. I'm actually going to take this to the iron and really get this crease out. I'm actually going to do that on all 4 of these because that will adjust my seam allowance. And fabric A and fabric B are the same width, but I want to get this line out before I start this. So my fabric A's need to be 33.5 inches wide. So like I said, this is width of fabric. So I'm just going to use the lines on my mat. That's the only time I do that. And I'm going to mark these at 33.5. So these are my fabric A's. I'm going to do the same thing for fabric B, except fabric B needs to be 31.5. And you can use, like, to make sure you're going across correctly, just line up your strip with one line on the ruler. And these are going to be your top and bottom, so I'm going to move these to the other side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fabric A strips and find the center. So I'm going to line this up. So I've got my outsides measured and my center. We're going to be adding to the side of the quilt first. So I'm going to find the center, put a pin here, find the center on the other side. And if you want to see how to add borders that are the exact size, you can watch our Haunted Halloween free mystery, and you can see 2 different ways to add borders. Line up your center and pin, your outside edges and pin, and you're going to do that on both sides. And right here, lots of pins are your friend because this will keep everything really nice when you go to the sewing machine. So for me, the more pins, the better. The other thing that I do differently on borders than everyone else is when I start stitching, I'm going to stitch starting here. I'm going to go across the fabric below, back stitch, and then keep stitching. Because when I envision someone using a quilt, the most stretch is going to be, or the most use is going to be around the borders. So I do back stitch right here. And the only time I do that on quilts is on my borders. So if I've added one border, I do it. If I add 3 borders, I do it on all 3 borders. So here you can see how I have stitched way past the border. That just is going to give it really nice and secure, and there's back stitches there. Now here, set your seam and press toward the border. And here, when you're pressing, watch where I put the edge of my iron. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these down. So I'm going to put a line on my Creative Grids ruler with the border seam. And I'm going to cut right there. We're going to do that on all 4 sides, and then we're going to use that same technique to add the top and the bottom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm only going to square up the corners of the quilt. So I'm going to put, this is a 8.5-inch square ruler. I just want it to be big enough to go a little bit on each side, and right here I'm just going to trim and trim, and that gives you a perfect corner on your quilt. Your finished quilt should be about 31.5 by 37.5, so it's a great size. You could use it for a table. You could use it to hang off your mantle if you have a fireplace, or you could just put it under your Christmas tree if you wanted to. So now that our quilt top is done, I'm going to talk about our quilt backing. Since we used the layer cake from the front, but it didn't use all the layer cakes, we're going to put those on the back. So we have done that where you have 5 by 6, and you're just going to chain piece those together, and any which way. It's just totally scrappy. So I've already done that, and I'm going to show that to you now and show you how to trim down or how to leave it as it is. Right now, our quilt top is 31 by 37. Our quilt back is 45 by 54. If you want to trim this down before it goes to the quilter so that it aligns the way you want it to, we'll need to trim a little bit. So we need to trim the 45.5 down to 41.5. So that's 4 inches. So we have 2 inches here and 2 inches here to trim off. Or you can just trim 4 inches off. From the side, 54 minus 47 is 7 inches. So you have to trim about 3.5 inches here and 3.5 inches here. And what that's going to do is make it perfectly even inside by chopping off each side the right direction. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, 41.5. So another thing you can do instead of just chopping off 3.5 is if you take 41.5 divided by 2, that's 20 inches and 3/4. And this doesn't have to be exact because it's going to your long arm quilter. You just want it to be centered enough. So I'm going to line up the edges, and if I take that 20 3/4 and I put it on my mat, 20 3/4 is right here. Now, like I said before, that should be about 2 inches. And like I said, it's going to go to your long arm quilter. I just want mine to be centered. So I'm just going to cut this off. Now, you could trust your long arm quilter to just center it, but I like it to be easy for my long arm quilter, so I'm just going to trim it down. Now, you could save this later to do log cabins with. Now we turn it the other way, and we wrote down 3.5. If we take 47.5 divided by 2, that's 23 3/4. Use your mat. 23 3/4 is right here. It should be about 3.5 inches, and it is. So I've double checked myself both times. And again, you can save those fabrics. So this should be 20 3/4, and it is. And then this in half should be 23 3/4, and it is. So the math that we've done here is 5 inches on each side, which is basically 31.5 plus 10 inches, or 37.5 plus 10 inches, because you have 2 sides of 5 inches. Thanks so much for joining me for the Evergreen Mystery Quilt Along. And remember, every year at Fat Quarter Shop, we have a free Christmas mystery. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.